my name is Stephanie Romer, and I just am making a little introduction to the following video. You're going to see a video about something that's like an entirely new paradigm, let's say, for how to view yourself and the universe. It's something that's going to tie together everything from science and religion to evolution and human thought. It'll tell us what AI actually is, what computers are, because everything is symbolic. And you can say that, and it immediately brings up the idea that humans can use them as symbols. But as I explained in the video, that is not the case. The symbols actually exist, and I use the human eye as the key symbol for entry of this concept, for the light, so to speak. But I just want you, I notice I'm very subdued in the video, and I'm just trying to be serious about it and think about what I'm saying. So it turns out to be really subdued. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that I wanted to do a disclaimer and say that once you view this video, you're not going to look at reality the same way anymore. So I just want you to know that up front before you start watching, that your world is about to change. All of our world is about to change pretty drastically, and I'm so immersed in it. I've been working on this stuff for 30 years. My first book, more than 20 years ago, was all about this stuff, how the universe can be read like a book, that it's symbolic. But nobody would listen. So now a lot of the chapters in the book have turned into actual people working on various aspects of it, including Donald Hoffman and Ian McGilchrist. There's just so many of them. That's a big problem with finishing the larger second book that I'm now finishing, is putting all the references in, and it's going to take a long time. So I released a smaller, less than 100-page book that introduces the concepts that will change your world forever, will be like a magical key to enlightenment, as one reviewer said on my first book that it wasn't, but I don't think he understood. So now that all these other researchers and all this more knowledge in the last 20 years is in place, now you can see it. Even though I saw it back then, it was hard to communicate about it. So I spent the last 20 years working out in detail much of the symbolism. It would be like somebody back in the day trying to talk about evolution and then having to work through the finch beaks and go on a 7-year voyage of the Beagle, and then spending another 10 years writing a book or whatever. And then once they got that stuff all together, then everyone could see it. So even though Darwin probably kind of knew what he was doing, he knew there was something there in the finch beaks and these variations he saw across the Galapagos Islands specifically, but also on other parts of his voyage and things too. So this is what this is turning into, and it does modify how we view evolution. Evolution itself is never going to be seen again as something that's simply for what Donald Hoffman says as fitness payoffs, or as resources or mates or something. Even though the computer system simulations work that way, it's because they're leaving something out. And I think we all understand there's something being left out by AI or these symbolic computer systems that we've built, and this is it. So you're going to find out a lot of things in this, and I just want to make sure up front that you realize how revolutionary this is, because I'm forced to obviously use the same words that we use to refer to things that are not revolutionary. Like if I say the human eye, you're like, oh yeah, that thing that ophthalmologist studies that I get glasses for, and light comes in and it's very useful for me and things like that. Well, it's a lot more than that. Like, you're never going to look in the mirror again and see your face in the same way after this video. So I just want you to know that if that's something that you want to do, there you go. But it's going to really make obsolete a lot of the way we view things. I hear people in videos talking, I'm like, that what they're saying is now obsolete. So Just wanted to say that up front. I don't know if it's really necessary, but I can't really tell because I'm so immersed in it. Like I said, this is the way I view the world. So get ready. This video is probably the most serious video that you're going to see. And understanding that will help you realize what you're hearing. So thanks for watching. Talk about my new book that just came out. I have it right here. It's called Eye of God. And I want to talk a little bit about what it's about. Read the back of it. This current small book is an introduction to the life work of the author on symbolic communication as a fundamental and experimentally demonstrable aspect of all reality. So that there is an actual building up of symbolic communication in the universe for a later consciousness to come in and perceive and read it. Which, as it's a fundamental feature of the universe that's experimentally demonstrable. It's an aspect of all of reality. Everything is symbolic at some level. And like all language, these symbols refer to things and tell stories about things that are separated from the symbol. So we have a symbol here that speaks of something over there. That's like the basic quality of symbols. And just to tie this into some new ideas, like in physics, that entanglement, the entanglement of everything is what weaves space-time itself, which makes perfect sense from the standpoint too. So this a feature of this theory is that it fits with everything that we know, all knowledge of humankind at this point in time. It fits with all of those things. So it would be like when Darwin went on the voyage of the Beagle, and he investigated finch beaks on these islands and how they vary depending on its food source. That was a local instance of a larger pattern that was related to everything that we know about life and how life forms and everything. So this is like that. This little book, it's only 100 pages long. It's 137 pages or something like that on Kindle. But it's a very short book. I had previously written a 700-page book that describes in great detail how it relates to all these things epistemologically. And then I have like 30 examples in the big book, including things like potatoes, octopuses, dragonflies. I had a whole bunch of symbols in there. Trees. A tree is probably one of my favorite ones too, besides the human eye. How the human brain is symbolic and what it symbolizes. The brain is a little bit harder one because it's unlike any other symbol, because symbols out there are formed in nature in a way that our brain has been evolved to perceive. But the human brain is something that's apart from that. There was no contingencies to understand the human brain. It's a symbol of what does the understanding. So it's unique among all things that we can perceive in the universe. So anyway, having said all that stuff, the one example in this book is of the human eye. The human eye is my favorite symbol, and it relates to what I just said about the brain because it's like an inroad to the brain. There's people that say that the human eye is an external piece of the human brain, which also fits completely with this theory cosmologically. Because it also relates to all physical things, not just life, like a tree is a symbol, an eye is a symbol, and things like that. But everything apart from life is a symbol, like an atom, solar system, the sun, and a lot of our ancestors saw some sort of symbolism in the sun. And that's another feature of how these symbols work, is that when consciousness is coming in to read it, it's kind of landing. As our knowledge expands, it's growing. So our knowledge expands and the consciousness is expanding. And then it comes in and realizes that how everything it sees is a communication to itself from something beyond space-time. So the human eye that I talk about in this book is just one example. But in my larger book, I talk about all of physics, all of physical reality, the four forces of physics, what those things are in relation to an atom, what gravity is. Gravity is probably my favorite physical symbol. And in this view, it symbolizes the force of meaning from beyond space and time. And even in the physics theories they have now about gravity, they think that one of the reasons why it has the characteristics it does is because there's like another reality layered on ours, but apart from it, and that gravity is coming from there, and so it seems weaker than the other forces. Although if enough matter gets together, it does succumb to the forces of gravity over friction, say at like 600 kilometers diameter of an asteroid, it starts becoming more spherical, and then you get to the size of like the moon and the Earth, and the forces of gravity cause it to form a sphere, things like that. And those things have symbolic relevance for human consciousness. And it's not an accident, because we are part of how the universe forms. We give rise to something that eventually is going to be what creates us. And that's the weird thing about it is, in my first book 20 years ago, I talk about how this relates to Teilhard de Chardin's theory of the omega point and everything. So this is definitely a more fine-tuned model. Now after 20 years, I've been thinking about it even more. I never stopped thinking about this. Everything I see and do relates to it. So this book is a 100-page book introducing the idea of the symbols and how to read them in the universe. Because the cool thing about it is there's only one way that it all fits together. One way that it all fits together. If you try to interpret one of the symbols in another way, it doesn't fit. So that's like characteristic of a good theory in science, because science uses a lot of experiments, and then we try to find the best theory that fits all of them, and the best mathematics, ideally, that fits everything, that can allow us to predict and explain how everything is. It's also the characteristic of the theory of evolution, because all the finch beaks and the Galapagos tortoises and the characteristics of life in general fit this evolutionary theory very well. So, however, I have to say that it only half fits it, because when you start looking at everything symbolically, you start seeing the coming into play of this other force in reality that started coming into play at the same time as all the physical theories and all the physical events and all those things that came into play from the beginning. And that is a force of meaning. That's why I say gravity is the physical counterpart to meaning that we experience as conscious beings. So it's pulling things together and everything. It's like an acting out of meaning in matter. So another way that you could look at it is that it's separated from us in space and time, and has a different way of doing it, and that everything we see in space and time is the attempts at meaning by a larger consciousness, and that any time that it failed in producing that meaning, it produced a symbol, at least of it, that it could build on, and eventually building an entire body that we know of as the universe and the Earth, so that it could come into being and perceive everything. So all of that's in the bigger 700-page book. All I want to talk about right now is the I in relation to this. So I'm just going to keep reading the blur in the back, and I'll start filling in some of the things that you'll find in this book. But okay, like all language, these symbols refer to things and tell stories about things separated from the symbol. The human eye is a key symbol in the human body to unlock how these symbol systems and also the universe itself works. And the reason I say that is because there are things you can see that are symbolized by trees, symbolized by the eye, symbolized by the octopus, that directly reflect features of the universe widely separated from us. Things that there's no way an octopus could have known living underwater. And in fact, that's what makes it a better symbol, because it's like our subconscious knowledge. Now that we have telescopes, we can look out in the universe and see all these things and how they work. We have science, so we can look down in the atom and everything. Now we can see how the symbol does relate to things that are in reality out there widely separated from us. So the symbols, the nature of them is that everything surrounding them contributes to the meaning. So like a tree, you can't tell the full meaning of a tree without taking into account the spherical dark earth that its roots go into, as well as the spherical bright sun above it. That's the only way you can understand what a tree is trying to say. And all life is speaking in this way, and that's what life is. It's the speaking of consciousness to consciousness in these various compiled forms that have evolved. So, and then I talk about what evolution actually is in reference to how meaning works, and that it's like a scroll or like a tapestry that's embroidered with the history of consciousness moving forward to know itself in this universe. So I'll continue with what I'm reading here. So you can like look at the eye and understand, it's probably the best symbol to understand the basic nature of consciousness, where it comes from, and the primary symbols of consciousness in the eye. So also knowing that, and that it projects to the brain, will tell you what the brain actually is. It's a structure that exists outside of space-time. So what we see symbolically is in reality something that exists outside of space-time, in the same way that the eye is a compound symbol of something that exists extremely far away from us as earthbound creatures. So, well, not all of it, because we live on the earth. That's part of the symbolism. But this is, the eye tells us what earth is. So, and then by inference, we can understand what the brain is, even though the brain does not exist here on this earth, in this universe, in its full operational form. The symbol of it is the interface to it. So in the same way that you can read this book, the interface to all the knowledge that I've gained in my life woven into this book in a very small form, and therefore know about things widely separated in time and space from you. And the eye is no different. Every symbol is like that. The universe is built that way so that consciousness could become aware. And what we're living in is a huge training center for consciousness. So I'll make that clear to begin with. So I'm just going to draw a picture of the eye on the board here. Here we have, and they have the right color just by accident. I didn't know they would have those here, but this is, let's say this is the iris right here. And this is going to be the sclera, or the white of the eye. So I'm going to go like this here. And red is good because your eyes can get red. There's like veins, you know, like this going around. It kind of look like when you look at the sun through a telescope with a filter on it, you can see like these lines going all through it, maybe some spots and all that kind of stuff. So there's that. And then this part being the sun is also emphasized by what the heart symbolizes. And the whole body symbolizes the whole space and time continuum and how it works. And then I can show how that works as well in my larger book, but right now I'm going to stick with the eye. And then we have here, this is the pupil of the eye here. All right, so I'm just drawing an eyeball, although it's important to understand the shape of the eye because it is also an indicator of that you're supposed to merge the symbols. So like this right here is this is the Vesica Pisces shape, and what that means is like the vessel of the fish or something like that. I mean, you could go like this and it would be a fish, you know, so that's where that comes from. But what it is, I mean, you have, let me just turn those into eyelashes, there we go. Okay. So when you take two spheres and you put them together, you get this, okay? Like that, so remember that. And that what the eye symbolizes is spherical things. So right here you have the eye, and the pupil is black. Light falls into it and is pulled in. And what else do we know of in the universe cosmically that is black and light falls in and is pulled in? It's a black hole, Okay, so the eye pupil is a black hole. The iris part, all of those are all usually like earth colors. Probably the best symbol if you're looking at it from outer space, from the standpoint of higher consciousness, is a blue eye. So, because the earth, like from the Voyager, I think it was, or the Mariner, it is a Voyager, I think, that took a picture of the earth from deep, deep space, way out past the solar system or whatever, or past Jupiter at least. Came back and took a picture and they saw a pale blue dot, and Carl Sagan talked about this pale blue dot in his talks that he gave as being the repository for all the history of everything we've ever loved or thought about. And it's just such a poignant, poetic thing. I just love. If you get a chance, look it up online, the pale blue dot, Carl Sagan or something. But so this right here, being the blue, I'm just going to use blue, but obviously there's other colors too. And that's the thing, is that the different shapes of eyes or the different colors and things can be titrated by the exigencies of a particular niche. And the niche that you go into can warp the symbol systems, and become a dead end. And that's why like 99% of species are extinct, because they didn't go down a path that would bring a helpful symbol. So it either has to be a helpful symbol, or that you're going to be the one path that does bring full consciousness in to see these things. So that's also in the larger book, but it all fits together like only one way. So I know these things are going to be the future. This is how we're going to be conceptualizing everything. So just keep that in mind. If someone has a better idea that actually combines all of the knowledge of humanity in a better way, I am absolutely open to it. But this is, to me, obviously the only way to do it. So it's through this meaning system, and considering that consciousness is fundamental to the universe. So this right here is the sun. So you have like sun, earth, and black hole. And I think it's really an important symbol, because then what comes in here projects into the brain. It also comes in and goes down like the stretching of space-time of a black hole. And then if you consider that our brain and all the relationships inside of it give us what we perceive of as time and space and all our memories, it just makes sense. But anyway, this, and then if gravity is meaning, obviously a black hole has more symbolism than just that. It's pointing to what we should look at in the universe that supports how we think about these things. So anyway, I just want to point that out, that this is how these symbols work. That's why I'm using the eye as the main example, is that right here you have this, that's like a Pisces shape, which is the combination of two spheres when they overlap, well, seen as in a symbolic 2D format anyway. But if you take two spheres and you overlap them, you get a lens shape. And so that's really important because of the lens inside of the eye that also supports that, because the lens is shaped like that. And then the things that we use when we look at stars, when we first started looking out into the universe from the Earth, was lens-shaped things. So that's like the human eye when original consciousness, which I pretty much know looks out through all of us, whether we know it or not, it's in there looking out. And this relates to some of my earlier work I did on synchronicity, about how each of us is like symbolic of this creative consciousness and intelligence, and of another path of it. Each one of us is like a unique path in the universe that it followed, and then it creates. So we create with each other. There's like a larger intelligence formed by all of us, just like a superorganism in an ant colony or something. So when you start noticing synchronicities in your own life, it is a symbol of how universes are assembled, so from the future. Because when you see a synchronicity, it's things that have traveled, separated in time and space to come together, and then you see meaning in them, and you're conscious of them. And I like to talk about it in reference to, in my first book I talked about, I use the analogy, and now other people I've noticed are using it, but how when a human is first conceived, it's one cell, and then those divide, and you get a body that eventually
you become aware in, and you can look back and understand that you came from all those things. We can look in and understand how it happened. Then we can look even further and see how evolution happened and everything, but the consciousness comes later. So that's like a symbol of that. So when you start reading the symbols, you can get a really good idea of how universes form and how all this stuff works together by just looking at the symbolism of the development of our body as well as our body, how it works now. Then you can start understanding that a lot of the way the symbols work is they're symbols of the future because of the future consciousness coming, which we are all aspects of, and bringing into existence with science and the internet and the information explosion and everything. What Ray Kurzweil calls the singularity. So this right here, this is, I'm gonna just go like this because this is lens here, and it's also this overlap shape, so it's repeated twice so that you can totally understand what's happening. And obviously you're going to say, well, you could look at this two ways, in like the Ian McGilchrist sense of like the left brain, the local way of looking at things, or the right brain meta way of looking at things, or something that's further in space and time that encompasses more. In his recent books, Master and His Emissary and The Matter with Things, which I highly recommend, he talks about this as being one of the fundamental conflicts in civilization. And I do too. I mean, a lot of these people that I'm going to be talking about, they all talk about these same things that I've thought about or talked about in my first book, and my second book, and then this third book. But so you can look at it as being this, when you have something that arises out of, say, infinite possibilities, it's going to be a subset. So anything that's a subset of it has to have certain rules, internal consistencies, and everything for it to exist as a whole, apart from the infinite possibilities. So you're making a decision and a selection. So that's why I talk about evolution as being not something just for life. Life is a symbolic readout of ultimate evolution, which is just out of infinite possibility. So when that happens, you have constraints that happen and all that kind of stuff. So there's going to be practical necessities as a result of that subset, because you don't have infinite possibility anymore. So this is like the conflict that is encompassed by the quote, right brain or left brain view of things, where you have the practical necessities in front of you. And it also is the same conflict between, like, say, an individual and all of society, or the tragedy of the commons. I don't know if people have heard about that before, where if you have like a common area where you all have your sheep grazed, pretty soon it's going to be completely decimated and there won't be anything left for anyone because it's free and everyone just uses, like that. So it's kind of an argument for ownership and capitalism and all that kind of stuff, which I think is pretty valid. But obviously a lot of problems with that, and I'm not going to go into it. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is this conflict between local things and things related to the larger picture. So obviously we see that with the eye, because the eye can be used to help you survive now, but there's a much bigger picture behind it. So you can look at the evolution of the eye. It's been like a contentious point for people that want to talk about creationism or as opposed to evolutionism. And really there's no conflict there. It's just that once you add in how things are symbolic, there really isn't a conflict anymore. So this is kind of what is going to bring science and religion together, is to understand that meaning is not something that we just make up. And the reason we think that is because language is a very recent invention of humans. And so what happens is we take these symbolic features of the universe and we've learned to translate them into voice or symbols that we write, or hieroglyphics. I love hieroglyphics because it's very much like what reality is like. And the Egyptians saw it that way too. They thought that hieroglyphics were the writings of the gods, and that the regular Coptic, I think, or I don't know what to call them, not a linguist, but or the Greek, like in the Rosetta Stone, those other types of languages were the common language for practical stuff. So it really does relate to these things in very deep, like intimate ways. But once you get away from the hieroglyphics, or even if you start using hieroglyphics to talk about things that aren't actually in the images, then you get a condition kind of like a detached retina, I like to call it, where you have the symbols that are pulled out, and now you're using them for these proximal purposes. So now I can use them to talk with other people and coordinate our behavior to get food or to do a job or something like that. And we see the process happening within language, because language itself is symbolic of this larger picture of things. So remember that everything is symbolic. So the language we're using is a symbolic reflection of the real symbolism in the universe. And you can start getting a handle on that, understand that better, by reading like George Lakoff's and Mark Johnson's work on that from Berkeley up here, I think. That stuff is really, really eye-opening. Be a little funny there. Because it shows how metaphors, when they start, are like live metaphors where you still remember the underlying thing. And then over time, people just use them as like levers and they forget the original meaning of them. So there's so many words like that. If you just pick up any one of his books, you'll see exactly what I mean. But that's what happens when we developed our own language. So we forgot the language of the universe. And I'm not so sure that we fully understood it, but we understood it in a non-verbal way, in a way that we couldn't talk about. And I think we still do. I think synchronicities affect people even when they don't consciously notice them, which sounds weird until you see the whole theory and understand how everything works like a backwards in time loop, even with your future self. So to get back to this stuff, this is the nature of language, that it's not just something that humans invented, and meaning is not something that we invented. The only reason we think it is because now we're locked into this narrow, blindered way of looking at symbols that is feeding back on our language. Our language became like a thing unto its own, and then it is symbolized in our computers now. We use symbols inside of our computers to make things like computer games and things like that. So, and something like an eye would be like what we see now as like an Easter egg or something in a computer game. Anybody that's a gamer knows what that means, I guess. But so that's the relationship there, and that the way I look at it is that we needed language to cross a bridge. And that bridge was that we couldn't go any further with the symbols as they were and the needs of our proximal environment as individuals. So like one step in the right direction was when we got to understand how plants work, and we were able to have agriculture and become more sedentary and have plenty of food. Then we didn't move through nature as much. Well, moving through nature is reading, and it's reading on a level that increases our ability to see the meaning. It expands our consciousness, things like that. So we became sedentary, and then we had written language. So like the hieroglyphics was an attempt to bring that in, and it didn't work so well. But I think that when you look at the bigger picture, there's always like another explanation. I could say as a proximal thing that didn't work so well, but if you look at the bigger picture, it looks more like it was a covered bridge so that humans could get through a dangerous period of change in our own brains and perception, a period of expanding of consciousness, and get to a point where we could read the symbols properly. Because if you don't read them the right way, then it's not going to work. And part of doing that is science. So we had to get to a point where we could do science in order to completely understand it. That's how you make the connection. People don't understand that science is like a way of connecting with the larger picture, like the larger consciousness behind reality. It brings it in for us, and then it gives us technologies as a result, because we're bringing in, through the filter of science, the infinite possibilities that exist beyond this universe, that if they were completely here at once, obviously the universe being a subset of that would completely dissolve and eliminate the universe. So we have to do it through the filter of starting with particles and little pieces of space at the Planck scale and everything to bring this stuff in. That's all in a larger book. You don't really need to be concerned with that. This right here just talks about the eye in relation to what humans are and how we're intimately woven into the universe. So the eye is shown to be evidence for the foundation of reality in a larger mind beyond the smaller collective, say, archetypes of Jung. or so there's these archetypes behind things that we don't necessarily see directly, but they affect everything we do. And these are symbolic things. So to give you an example of what this would be like in a human linguistic format, it would be like Joseph Campbell reading all of these stories of these various civilizations through history and seeing a monomyth in the midst of all of them that he distilled out into this hero story, which we know now that is something that people greatly respond to the meaning of. And that's how it works, is that when you see something that has relevance for the future and deep relevance for the human condition, it's something that sparks our motivation and curiosity and our need to transmit it to other people. So this hero mythology is distilled into this one monomyth in that sense. And so it's really, you can see that in science as well, because we'll do a bunch of experiments and then we'll have just like this one thing behind it. We're discovering the monomyth behind all chemical reactions, and then we write it in the form of the periodic table, let's say. So periodic table is like this organized way of looking at the information that we get from all these experiments that can also predict. We can predict in the empty spots where there's going to be another element. We can roughly predict their chemical properties. And then if you look at the different elements, and then anything that doesn't exist on the table is something that doesn't really stay around long. You can make like different types of isotopes or something that decays after a longer or shorter period. And some of the ones that decay almost immediately they've done computer simulations on this stuff, and it's, when you do that, you see that there's a whole bunch of other substances that could exist that don't, because they just disappear, they don't fit. So that's kind of a good way to conceptualize or symbolize infinite possibility compared to what is now. This is something that would remain existing, and it's super important to understand that just to remain existing is one fundamental constraint on any reality. So whether it's the periodic table, a human, and evolution, or anything like that. So these are like new fundamental laws of how information works that come from all this. But so the I is shown to be evidence for the foundation of reality in a larger mind, beyond the smaller collective archetypes of Jung, and extending to the subatomic and astrophysical realms, to include gravity as a symbolic force, for example. This is an introduction to the idea and does not include the author's work on synchronicity and other flora and fauna, to focus on the eye as the point of entry for the light. I love that. And that's another thing about it, is that everything is poetic when it does come together. All the features of the eye, like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, what could be more beautiful than to have these great things, our earth, the sun, and the singularity symbolized in something that feeds into our brains. I mean, that's just so beautiful. So when they say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, a lot of our metaphors and analogies, if you look at them from this larger symbolic view, have the same quality. So like when we talk about the tree of knowledge, that does relate directly to how things actually work. Like we think that we're just making a tree out of our evolution of our knowledge, or that we could see the evolutionary tree, and then we see how it branches off and everything. And those things are actually valid conceptualizations of how the actual universe itself works, and from beyond space and time. So it's another implication of this. So anyway, that's the basic idea. The eye as being a symbol of these things is very important for understanding who and what humans are, what our future is. And once again, this book is 100 pages. The idea is very simple. I mean, you can state it in one sentence, just like you can the theory of evolution. It's highly complicated because it deals with the minutiae of the way everything from mitochondria being embedded in a cell works, to how DNA works to transmit qualities, and how epigenetics works and things like that. It's all part of the evolutionary process, and how we evolve our knowledge in science, like I was talking about, where we find the truth underlying all these phenomena, or at least the way that they fit together in a functional sense. that also happens to be symbolic. Anytime we come up with a technology or we come up with a new way of looking at knowledge like the periodic table, we know that it's, to me, the biggest indicator of actual truth is that it relates to a lot of other things in this symbolic way. So all of this stuff kind of brings together like the humanities and science and religion into one big unified whole that has a higher meaning to it. So the problem comes when you have these local interpretations, just like with the parable of the blind man and the elephant, where they have the local interpretations of something that's larger. That's what all of these different various divisions of science and inquiry for humans, that's what those things are like, but really what ties it all together is this common meaning in this universe. So one thing that's really good about this is that it does predict things, like I was showing with the eye, how it, since these symbols, we know what these are now, is thanks to science, that we can now use that and the rest of the structure of the brain and the body to help us understand what's really going on in the universe and beyond, even beyond it, in various ways. But that's all I had to say about it. This is the book. It's on Amazon right now. Just came out just a few days ago, like a week ago. And then the larger book, I'm just doing the references, and they'll be coming out soon. So, thank you.